Yeah,
Good to see you. So good to see
I've
you.
joined to listen to you.
So I am so moved beyond
Yes.
words.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good
Good
morning, Urmila.
morning. Good
Good morning.
morning.
Yes, Vasu ma'am, please start.
Yes. Ben Jonson, the prominent English playwright, in his first folio preface in the year 1622, mentioned about Shakespeare from his very famous quotes. I quote, Shakespeare was not of an age, but for all time. Hence, 4 centuries have rolled on and 400 centuries have rolled on, and still we come today as ever to rejoice the magic and charisma of Shakespeare. A very pleasant good morning to the August gathering. I, Dr. Meenakshi Wasnik, on behalf of the cluster institutions, do welcome my dear participants, research scholars, and Shakespeare admirers. Shakespeare's Society of Central India, in collaboration with Department of English of Dr. S.A. GULHANE, PRERNA College of Commerce and Science, Nagpur, SANTAJI Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur, HISLOP College, Nagpur, J.M. Patel Arts, Commerce and Science College, Bhandara, and Dr. MADHUKARRAO WASNIK, P.W.S. Arts, Commerce and Science College, Nagpur, organize 7 days online certificate course in Shakespearean Studies. It is my distinct privilege to welcome the organizers of the Shakespearean certificate course. At the very outset, I feel honored to welcome the President of Shakespearean Society of Central India, Honorable Dr. Tapti De Madam, a soul-stirring verses of a poet who needs no introduction yet deserves every accolade. Recently, the Executive Committee of Shakespearean Society has nominated Madam in the pivotal role of President of Shakespearean Society of Central India. It is my immense pleasure and honor to welcome Honorable Dr. Urmila Dabir Madam, former Chairman, Board of Studies, English, RTMNU, and now currently holding a prestigious position as a principal in PRERNA College of Commerce and Science, Nagpur. I heartily welcome our guiding force behind this certificate course, Honorable Dr. Usha Sakure Madam, Secretary, Shakespearean Society of Central India, and Principal in Manohara Kamri Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur. With immense exultation, I welcome the beacon of academic excellence, Honorable Dr. Priya Vanjari Madam, Principal at Santaji Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur. I feel Prashant Sirke sir, Principal at HISLOP College, Nagpur. It is my earnest duty to welcome the distinguished personality, Honorable Dr. Pradeep Meshram sir, Principal at J.M. Patel Arts, Commerce and Science College, Bhandara. May I now welcome a lady with a vision with excellence, brilliance, Honorable Dr. Pradnya Bagre Madam, Principal of Dr. MADHUKARRAO WASNIK, P.W.S. Arts, Commerce and Science College, Nagpur. I feel equally elated to welcome the coordinators of this program, Dr. Karthik Panikar sir, Dr. Malti Panga Madam, Dr. Nihal Sheikh sir, Dr. Sudesh Bhaute sir, and Mrs. Snehal Rakunde Madam in this literary venture. We now move on to the most significant moment of this ceremony, the inaugural address. It is my proud privilege to invite the guiding force behind today's event, Dr. Usha Sakure Madam, Secretary of Central India of Shakespearean Society. Let me take this opportunity to introduce shortly to Dr. Sakure Madam. Madam is an eminent educationist, distinguished professor, and head of the Department of English, and currently working as a principal of Manohara Kamri Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur. Her passion for literature and creativity is reflected in her leadership as a Secretary of Center for Literary Interaction and Creativity and Shakespearean Society of Central India. Madam is an accomplished poetess with over 30 published poems, a seasoned creative writer, and a perceptive literary critic. Her stellar contribution to education and social upliftment have earned her some of the most coveted honors and awards, which includes the prestigious Bharat Jyoti Award, the Savitribai Phule Excellence Award, and the distinguished Vidarbha Bhushan Award. May I now request Madam to kindly enlighten our dear participants with your inaugural address. Over to Sakure Madam.
Thank you, Vasnik ma'am. So, good afternoon to all the dignitaries, respected resource persons, coordinators, teachers, and all the collaborating colleges principals. With great pride, the Shakespeare Society of Central India, in collaboration with Department of English of Dr. S.A. GULHANE PRERNA College, SANTAJI MAHAVIDYALAYA, HISLOP College, J.M. Patel College Bhandara, Dr. MADHUKARRAO WASNIK P.W.S College, welcomes you all to this National Online Certificate Course in Shakespearean Studies 2025. Friends, prior to this, I take this opportunity to pay our homage to our late founder and president, Dr. Pranoti Chakravarti ma'am, who left us in February and left a void never to be filled again. We show our deep sense of respect for her on this occasion, and may her soul rest in peace. Amen. Friends, every year, this academic initiative is successfully conducted with the aim of keeping Shakespeare's legacy alive and relatable to the modern world. This platform brings together eminent scholars and renowned academicians from across the nation and abroad who offer fresh perspectives, contemporary interpretations, and critical insights into Shakespearean plays, sonnets, and cultural impact. This year's course promises an engaging journey exploring diverse and thought-provoking dimensions such as psychology of power, feminist reading, the supernatural, post-coloniality, mental health in drama, and innovative hermeneutic approaches. Through these enlightening sessions, participants will not only deepen their understanding of Shakespeare, but will also learn to analyze his work through modern, cultural, and psychological and theoretical lenses. I'm confident that this program will enrich students, researchers, and literary lovers with enhanced critical thinking and academic excellence. Wishing you all a meaningful and intellectually rewarding experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. Your thought-provoking introductory address would definitely open up new annals of creative thinking in our learning process. Dear participants, winter approached. So, how can one be far behind to enjoy the winter tales? So let's celebrate Shakespearean's exquisite literary delicacies. For this, today we have with us a very eminent academician, Dr. Supanta Bhattacharya sir, as a resource person in today's session. I welcome you, sir, in today's session. Let me give his short introduction. Dr. Supanta Bhattacharya sir is a doyen of academia and a luminary of the stage. Sir graces at HISLOP College, Nagpur, not merely as a professor of English, but as the esteemed director of its postgraduate program. His profound presence resonates through the vibrant landscape of theatre, where his artistry has animated over 150 productions spanning the English, Hindi, Bangla, and Marathi stages. Within this extensive repertoire shine his masterful interpretation of Shakespearean characters, the scheming Claudius, the deluded Malvolio, and the formidable Shylock, each rendered with compelling depth. Beyond the footlights, his charisma captivates audiences as a celebrated quizmaster, a role through which he has presided over 5 prestigious national inter-university competitions. A published poet of distinction, Dr. Bhattacharya presides as a discerning editor of the journal called Rhythmics. His own verses have garnered the coveted prize from the British Council and the Poetry Society of India and found homes within the numerous respected anthologies. His scholarly contribution further enriched the discourse in esteemed national and international journals. In a testament to his linguistic prowess and literary bridge building, he rendered a nuanced plays of Mahesh Elkunchwar into English, a significant translation published under the prestigious imprimatur of Oxford University Press, India. We are indeed honored to be in the presence of an illustrious luminary, Dr. Supanta Bhattacharya sir, whose immortal enthusiasm towards Shakespeare has carved a permanent place in the literary sanctuary of Shakespearean studies. With immense exultation, I welcome you, sir, in today's session and invite Dr. Supanda Bhattacharya, sir, to deliver his talk on the very influential topic, Psychology of Prowess. Over to Supanda, sir.
Thank you so much, Meenakshi ma'am. Good afternoon once again, friends. And it's indeed a great honor to be a part of this wonderful Shakespeare certificate course with which I have been associated right from its inception. And a big, big thank you to my dear friend Usha, who's a miracle worker, as I often call her. She juggles so many things, and all of them with equal proficiency. Thanks to all of you who have joined, some very good friends here, some students, and let's not waste any more time. And I shall immediately try to share my screen with you. This is the moment of reckoning when please hold your breath. Is it visible? Is the presentation visible?
No, sir, not yet.
Yes, sir, it is processing now.
Yeah, I can see that. So much.
Visible. It is visible.
No, no, don't worry. I mean, we are in safe hands. I have already taken the precaution of sending it to Usha.
Very good.
Certain days I can be very smart. Visible now?
Yeah,
Oh, great.
it is visible.
A round of applause, please, for my
Yes.
competence. Yeah.
Slideshow and from the beginning. That's it.
Good. Are we good?
Great, great. Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Usha. Okay. So this is my topic, Shakespeare and the psychology of power. So as you can see, my talk today would be divided into two equal halves. Okay, one I'd be talking about power and the psychology of power and some of the theories associated with the psychology of power, and then we'll try to see how Shakespeare, with his instinctive genius, preempted some of these theories. Now, power, as it says in this slide, uh, at its in its most fundamental sense, power refers to the capacity to influence, to control, or direct the behavior, thoughts, and outcomes of other individuals or other social institutions. Yet, it seems a very seemingly it's a very apparently straightforward definition, but this belies an extraordinarily complex psychological social phenomenon that has preoccupied philosophers, psychologists, political theorists, and literary scholars for literally centuries. Power is, as we know, similarly, simultaneously, power is external and internal. Power is structural and personal. Power is overt and invisible. Power operates not only through force and coercion, although these are very significant tools of power. But apart from force and coercion, power also operates through consent, desire, language, and the diverse categories through which we humans understand ourselves and we understand our reality, understand our world. Now, let us look at some historical approaches to understanding power. Classical political philosophy, uh, to your extreme left, Plato, Plato's Republic. Then we have Aristotle's Politics, Kautilya's Arthashastra. I haven't included Aristotle in this visual. So these classical philosophers primarily concerned themselves with questions of what is legitimate authority, what is ideal governance. Power was understood around this period largely in terms of sovereignty, who should rule, and what gives you the right to rule. Okay, we'll come to that a little later when we come to the divine rights of king during the reign of James the First, when we come to Shakespeare. But basically, these ancient political philosophers, they were concerned with the ideas of governance. Who should rule, who should be the ideal ruler, and what should be his right. Uh, Psychological dimensions of power, they largely remained implicit. They were embedded in the discussions of things like virtue, wisdom, the proper ordering of the soul. All of you who are familiar with the works of Plato will know this. Then look at the gentleman on our extreme right. This is Niccolo Machiavelli. And Machiavelli's very influential work, which created a continental paradigm shift in the 16th century, The Prince, all right, which was published in 1532. And this created a kind of a shift. Now, what Machiavelli did was, he, instead of these idealized versions of power as practiced by the previous philosophers, Machiavelli offered a very cold, a very pragmatic analysis of power, which acknowledged the psychological mechanism. Very similar, I mean, I have seen lots of similarities between Kautilya's Arthashastra and Machiavelli's The Prince. Both consider the cultivation of fear versus love, the importance of appearance in a ruler, and the strategic use of cruelty, exemplary cruelty, how cruelty can be used to impart fear and obedience in the subject. Machiavelli intuitively arrived at what psychologists would later systematize, that power operates as much through perception and belief as through material force. So these two characteristics, material and perception and belief, these are more crucial, these are more important in the operation of power than brutal, material, tactile force. Next philosopher who tried to make a systematic study of power was the great German Nietzsche. All right, Nietzsche, the various pronunciation, but let's confine ourselves to the anglicized pronunciation, Nietzsche. And Friedrich Nietzsche's concept, this is the concept, Der Will zur Macht, which means the will to power. This revolutionized thinking about power's psychological dimension. For Nietzsche, power was not merely a social or a political phenomenon, but it was a fundamental drive within our psyche, within every individual persona. It underlies all aspects of human behavior. The will to power, all right, this Der Will zur Macht. This will to power manifested not only in domination over others, but in within the human self. Power overcomes aspects like creativity and the imposition of meaning upon existence. Power equations determine how we determine meaning of the reality that we see around us. Nietzsche made a very important distinction. He said morality has two aspects. One is master morality. Now, what is master morality? Master morality is the ethics of the powerful, all right, those in power, who define their own values. That is master morality. And as opposed to master morality, there is slave morality. Slave morality, the reactive ethics of the powerless, most of us, majority of us, the reactive ethics of the powerless, born from resentment, or the resentment towards those in power. This psychological genealogy revealed how power relations become internalized as moral systems. This is an insight, all right, this idea that power relations, power dynamics, they are eventually embedded into our psyche, and they eventually become the moral system, the moral code by which we guide our behavior. So this is, sorry, this is an insight which would profoundly influence 20th century thought. Now let's come to those 20th century ideas. Let's talk about the psychological perspectives of power. Sigmund Freud, his psychoanalytic theory is not explicitly focused on political power, but still it offered very crucial insights into the psychology of authority. Uh, all of you know the tripartite structuring of the human psyche, the id, the ego, and the superego. The Freudian concept of the superego explained how gradually, over a certain period, over a certain duration of time, external authority becomes internalized, and it creates internal structures of self-regulation and guilt. In Freud's works like Group Psychology and the Analysis of the Ego, written in 1921, and Civilization and Its Discontents, 1930, Freud explored how individuals surrender individual autonomy to leaders and groups. A part of our freedom, a part of our autonomy is surrendered to various leaders, various political groups, and this is driven by the unconscious desire for protection and identification. So, if I surrender a bit of my group, a bit of my identity, a bit of my autonomy to a certain political group, they would protect me in times of crisis. If I surrender some of my autonomy to a certain leader, then he or she would protect me during a time of trouble. So, for protection and identification, we surrender a certain part of our autonomy to individuals, to individual leaders, and to groups. Later psychoanalysts developed these insights further, but Freud was the father of this idea. The gentleman below, whose picture you see below Freud, his name was Wilhelm Reich, Reich, Wilhelm Reich. He examined the psychology of fascism. All right, he was even during the Nazi reign. He tried to understand what is the psychology that makes the Nazis such a dominant force. Then to your right, the gentleman in glasses is Eric Fromm. All right, Eric Fromm explored the fear of freedom that makes people susceptible to authoritarian submission. Eric Fromm believed that human beings don't want freedom. Absolute freedom is a concept that is very terrifying to us. So willingly, we give up our freedom to these fascists or to these authoritarian forces. Below Eric Fromm is, of course, the one and only Jacques Lacan. And we have studied Lacan and we have taught Lacan. His theory of the mirror stage and symbolic order revealed how our identity, human identity itself, is constituted through relationships of recognition and power. All right, mutual recognition, recognition of each other's abilities and shortcomings, and power dynamics. This is what constitutes identity, human identity. Now we go to the more the 20th century post-war theoretical framework. And if we are talking about power, there is one name which we can definitely not ignore, and that is the great Michel Foucault. No thinker, in my humble opinion, has been more influential in shaping contemporary understanding of power psychology than this theorist, Michel Foucault. Foucault rejected traditional conception of power. He said power is not primarily repressive, power is not prohibitive, but Foucault argued that fundamentally power is productive. All right, power is productive. It governs virtually every aspect of our existence, everything. Foucault studied madness, Foucault studied sexuality, Foucault studied writing, all from this lens, all through the lens, all through this from the perspective of power. He believed power creates subjects, power creates knowledge, and power creates various forms of life rather than merely constraining them. Now, several key insights characterize Foucault's approach. First, power is relational, it's not possessive. Power is not something that one owns. It's a relationship between actors, it's a relationship between agents, between doers. Uh, Power circulates through networks rather than flowing from a sovereign center. Alright, there is no one determinant center of power, but power has multiple sources and there's a network of power, all right, at various levels. And let's not go too much into its details, but power networks operate at multiple levels. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you'll find power networks controlling every aspect of your existence. The second thing that Foucault tried to analyze is how power operates through discourse. Uh, the categories, concepts, and forms of knowledge through which we understand reality are themselves products of power relations. All right. So the discourses themselves, the multiple discourses which make their presence felt in our lives, these discourses themselves are products of power relations. Power shapes what we are able to think, what we are able to express, what we are able to know. All right, our I mean, nothing. There is nothing in our existence which is not modeled, which is not shaped by power. Then Foucault also believed power produces subjects through various something a term he used, very interesting term, technologies of the self, quote unquote, technologies of the self. Through various technologies of the self, individuals are constituted as particular kinds of subjects. What are these subjects? So certain individuals are citizens, certain individuals are criminals, certain individuals are patients, you know, the study of madness, certain individuals are students, and so on and so forth. So these categories, all right, these subject clusters, they are created by power. How does power work? Not by suppressing authentic selves, but by creating specific subjectivity. Today, probably in the 21st century, we call it labeling. All right, you behave in a way which does not conform with accepted behavior patterns, so we label you mad. All right, and we set you aside. And this labeling is done by the power system, by the power structures. Then discipline and normalization. Again, a very popular subject with Foucault. Discipline and Punish, of course, that famous book. Modern power operates less through spectacular violence. This is something Foucault believed would gradually become extinct. All right, not visible violence, not spectacular violence which can be proved by evidence. More through subtle mechanisms, the state power or any other form of power, they would operate through very subtle, very unrecordable, very very nuanced mechanisms of surveillance, of examination, and normalization. And the objective is to produce very docile, self-regulating subjects. This creation of docile subjects, this is the purpose of power. And Foucault, of course, was a great fan of George Orwell. So those of us who are familiar with Animal Farm and 1984 will know how this is done, how power is used to create a very subservient and extremely meek and very respectful, obedient group of subjects. And Foucault analyzed the panopticon device, all right, the panopticon device of Jeremy Bentham, which is a prison designed in such a way, it's like a spiral prison. So prisoners never know when they are being watched. So panopticon became a very powerful metaphor for how modern power induces self-surveillance. And in the online age, in the digital age, we know how you are constantly under surveillance, snoopware, and every time you switch on the search engine, a hidden camera goes on somewhere. So you never really know when you are being monitored, when you are being observed. You are constantly just take it for granted that you are under surveillance all the time by the powers that be. And the last is resistance. Resistance is immanent to power. Where there is power, there is always resistance. So this is something that Foucault found very hopeful, very optimistic, that resistance is integral to power. You can't have power without resistance. The two are mutually constitutive. All right, they are not just opposed. Power is impossible without resistance. This is what gave Foucault hope that power would never be an all-consuming entity. It would never be a completely um, uh, a completely uh, comprehensive phenomenon. There would always be resistance to power. These are some of the recent theories, more contemporary, late 20th century, early 21st century theories of power. I'll just briefly go through this. The gentleman to your right is Ducker Keltner, and they have come across this very interesting concept of power paradox. Now, power paradox means that individuals gain power using empathy and social intelligence. But once they possess power, then these two characteristics, these two qualities diminish. The powerful are now no longer attuned to others' perspectives and they act on their own impulses, which is so relatable. We have seen how people, various political parties, various political leaders, they exploit empathy, they exploit social intelligence, and probably all this is genuine when they are on their climb upward to power. But once they acquire power, suddenly empathy seems to have vanished. When they acquired power, there is no social intelligence. It's as if they have become a completely different uh, class of individuals altogether who I mean the sufferings and the anxieties and the problems of the majority no longer resonate with them. So Dachner Keltner, he refers to this as power paradox. Then post-structuralist theories, as developed by Foucault and Jacques Derrida, post-structuralist theory emphasizes that language is never neutral. Language is always implicated in power relations. All right? There are power structures embedded within language, so that whenever we are using language, subconsciously a kind of a power dynamics are being implanted within us. The words that are available to us to describe reality, the categories through which our experience is organized, and the narratives that make sense of the events that happen to us. All these things reflect and reinforce specific configurations of power. Now, this insight has profound psychological implications. If our own very concepts and categories are shaped by power, then power operates at the very deepest levels of cognition and experience. A person who can define certain terms or frame debates and establish which questions are legitimate exercises a subtle but profound form of control. All right. So, language, if you are able to control language, you are able to control power. Again, there are too many examples from contemporary reality, from contemporary political scenario to give any specific examples. But language according to post-structuralist theory, it has power dynamics, power structures embedded within it, and that is very subtly, very consciously used by the powers that be to dominate and to exercise control. Now we come to drama. Literary texts, particularly drama, offer a very unique access to the psychology of power. Unlike philosophical treatises, unlike empirical studies, literature presents power as practical lived experience, dramatizing its psychological operations. And how this is done? This is done through character, through actions, and through language. Shakespeare's plays, they were written at a very historical moment of profound political transformation. These plays provide remarkably sophisticated exploration of how power shapes, deforms, and constitutes human psychology. So, what can we observe through dramatic representation? Not just Shakespeare. We can observe how power corrupts through gradual psychological transformation, how the powerful rationalize their dominance, how the powerless negotiate constraint and seek recognition. We can observe how language serves both as instrument of power and mask of power. We can observe how surveillance and visibility function as mechanisms of control, how identity unravels when stripped of power, how gender, race, and class mediate psychological experiences of power. So, to summarize, therefore, this part of my talk, the psychology of power reveals that power is never merely an external thing, it's never merely an external entity. It's a matter of who controls resources, of who makes decisions. Power operates at the most, at the deepest, at the most intimate levels of psychology. Power shapes desires, power constitutes our identities, power defines what seems natural or possible, and power structures the various categories through which we understand ourselves and we understand others. The psychology of power is ultimately the psychology of what it means to be human in relationship with others. How we understand ourselves, how we frame ourselves, and are framed through networks of recognition, constraint, possibility, and negotiation. To understand power psychologically, it is to understand something very basic, something very essential about human condition itself. Now we go back in time and we go to the Elizabethan and Jacobean age. This section I have called Shakespeare's anxious universe. Although there was political stability, there was a lot of anxiety. Okay, and there were lots of power struggle. Okay, let's briefly talk about the historical context of the age. So, as I have said, this is a world of socio-political anxiety. Shakespeare, as we know, was born in the year 1564 and he died in 1616. He lived and wrote during one of the most politically turbulent and intellectually, what's the word? Intellectually transformative, transformative periods of English history. As we know, his career spanned the reigns of two monarchs. Elizabeth I, who reigned from 1558 to 1603, and she was succeeded by James I, who ruled from 1603 to 1625. And Shakespeare and his contemporaries, they witnessed profound anxieties. Anxieties about what? Anxieties about succession. Queen Elizabeth, she died intestate. She died without a legitimate heir. So succession, who's to be our next king? Legitimacy. Questions about religious conflict. All right, Roman Catholics versus Protestants. Assassination plots. We'll come to all these things. And the very nature of royal authority. What gives the king the right to rule? These historical circumstances, they did not just merely provide the background for Shakespeare's plays. They fundamentally shaped his penetrating psychological exploration of power. And surprisingly, many of these theories, they have acknowledged their debt to Shakespeare. That without knowing much of theory, somehow instinctively, at a very gut level, he had understood these pulls and pushes of power. The Virgin Queen, the political landscape of Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I's reign was haunted by the succession question. As we know, she was called the Virgin Queen, and she refused to marry or to name an heir, to name a successor. And this created massive debates of debates about who would be the next ruler, who would inherit the throne of England. And they were from the 1580s, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, to the 1590s and right up to the moment of death, of Elizabeth's death. There was a long sustaining period of uncertainty and anxiety. Who would succeed her? Would there be civil war? Would England fall to Catholic powers? Countries like France and Holland. This created a kind of an existential political uncertainty, and this uncertainty pervades many of Shakespeare's works, particularly those plays which deal with contested succession and the psychological cost of uncertain legitimacy. There was religious conflict, there was surveillance. After Reformation, Henry VIII's Reformation, England was a surveillance state. Catholics were persecuted, priest holes concealed fugitives, and government spies infiltrated households. In 1586, there was a plot, the Babington plot, to assassinate Elizabeth and replace her with Mary, Queen of Scots. That again led to intensified surveillance. There were spies in disguise, all right, very Machiavelli, very Cordelia. Okay, so spies in disguise would roam the streets of London and other cities. And the master spy handler was a very trusted aide of Elizabeth, was Francis Walsingham, one of the most influential characters in history of that age. So Francis Walsingham, he created a huge network of spies. Some say that almost 10,000 people, 10,000 spies were employed by Francis Walsingham, which considering the population of that age is no mean number, no small number. So he created these spy networks, and there was an atmosphere of suspicion. No one could be certain who's watching, who's listening. So there's a lot of suspicion, there's a lot of mutual hatred, mutual anger, mutual distrust, and everybody spoke very guardedly because Walsingham's spies could be listening. So this created a kind of an atmosphere of paranoia and concealed identities. And therefore, in Shakespeare, you'll repeatedly find that people are not exactly who they are. One may smile and smile and smile and be a villain. Okay, and people are constantly changing their appearance. They're entering into some kind of a guise, some kind of a disguise. And so this atmosphere of distrust and suspicion, it profoundly influenced Shakespeare's dramatic imagination. Then in 1601, just 2 years before Elizabeth died, there was the Essex Rebellion. The Earl of Essex tried to foment a revolution and against Elizabeth. And this was at the peak of Shakespeare's career. In fact, Essex's supporters, they commissioned a performance of Shakespeare's Richard III. I'll be talking about this play a little later. And there's a deposition scene here. In this deposition scene, what happens is the legitimate ruler is deposed and somebody else takes over. So this play was commissioned, and the next day there was the rebellion. They were hoping to sway public opinion through the play. Now Shakespeare's company was investigated, but they were not charged because they realized that they did not know about the plot. And this incident demonstrates how there is a dangerous proximity between theatrical representation and political action. And it showed Shakespeare firsthand how drama could be implicated in power struggles. And after this happened, after the Essex Rebellion, so many of Shakespeare's plays, his tragedies in particular, they became very overtly political. Then Elizabethan political theory grappled with competing concepts of royal authority. Again, about this we'll discuss about this when we talk about Richard's play, Richard II. The king is supposed to have two bodies. All right, the king's two bodies: the mortal body of the king, the mortal body of the monarch, and his immortal political body. All right, the body which is for the public, which is for his citizens. This created very fascinating contradictions, very fascinating tensions that Shakespeare explores repeatedly. All right, where does the private self of the king end, and where does the public self begin? What are the limits of royal power? Okay, the what are the rights of subjects vis-a-vis the monarch, and what is the nature of legitimate authority? So these were not really theoretical; these were not abstract questions, but they were urgent political issues at that point of time. And then 1603, Queen Elizabeth died, and King James I took over. This phase is known as the Jacobean transformation. The adjective of James I for my students, for the students here, is Jacobean. And when he was actually originally James VI of Scotland. So when he became the king of England, he was known as James I. And he brought with him a very absolutist political philosophy. He himself was a writer, and he wrote pamphlets like The True Law of Free Monarchies, 1598, and Basilicon Doron in 1599. So these pamphlets, they articulated a theory of divine right of monarchy. A legitimately appointed king has the divine right to rule. He's the direct representative of God, and he's accountable to God alone. So he derives authority from God, and therefore he's accountable to God alone. And ordinary subjects, they have no right to question a king because he has the divine right. And now you'll notice that after Queen Elizabeth died, suddenly Shakespeare's tragedies, they turn very dark, very grim, all right, and very psychologically complex. And many of them discuss tyranny. All right, Shakespeare was exploring the concept of tyranny after, because at that point of time nobody knew what James I would turn out to be. Many people thought that he would become a dictator. All right, he would become an absolutist, a very magisterial kind of a monarch. That did not thankfully happen because of James I's personal qualities, because of his interest in literature and art. So he proved to be a very decent king right up to his death in 1625. But for the first few years, nobody was certain what to expect from this new ruler, from this new monarch. And the plays written under James by Shakespeare, they show a very intense interest in the psychology of absolute power and how power leads to corruption, how power corrupts the individual who is in power. 1605, the Gunpowder Plot. This was a Catholic conspiracy to blow up Parliament and kill James I. It's still celebrated in England, the Guy Fawkes night. This created renewed paranoia about treason, equivocation. Equivocation is a very interesting term in Shakespeare. Equivocation means to give false witness, all right, to lie, to commit perjury, to lie under oath. And if some of my literature students are here, I have talked to them about James Shapiro, the renowned Shakespearean critic, who once gave a 3-hour lecture at Cambridge on this one word alone. All right, how Shakespeare explores various dimensions of equivocation, giving false witness. So the Gunpowder Plot made renewed the idea of surveillance, equivocation, and concealed identity. And so the Jesuit Christians, they had a doctrine of equivocation that under oath you can speak ambiguously. All right, you can speak words or sentences having multiple meanings without technically lying. Because you could always wriggle out by saying, no, I didn't say so. All right, this was how you interpreted it. My actual meaning was this. So this almost became a science, how to lie under oath in a very ambiguous manner. And equivocation became a subject of national debate. Is this ethical? Is this legitimate? So these concerns appear directly in Macbeth, which was written shortly after this plot, 1600, around 1605. The witch trials and the supernatural. James the First was obsessed with witchcraft, and he wrote a pamphlet called Demonology. And students of Macbeth will know that quite a few witches they were persecuted, and because it was believed that they were responsible for creating a storm when James was traveling, and they were trying to kill him, and so quite a few innocent women were killed after this incident happened. And Scottish witch trials intensified under James I's rule. And so this royal preoccupation, this preoccupation of James I with witchcraft, it influenced Macbeth. And the weird sisters, remember, in Macbeth, you don't have witches. The word witch is never mentioned in Macbeth. They're always referred to as the weird sisters. And the weird sisters feature very prominently. They form the supernatural mechanism of Macbeth. And this play, Macbeth, explores the psychological vulnerability of those who seek forbidden knowledge, just like Shakespeare's predecessor, Christopher Marlowe, had done it in Dr. Faustus. Shakespeare's enduring fascination with power dynamics and the psychology of those who wield power, it pervades the entire body of his work, and it reveals a profound understanding of how authority corrupts, transforms, and ultimately consumes those who pursue it. From the tragic decline of Macbeth, who becomes enslaved by his own ambition and paranoia after seizing the crown through murder, to the gradual unraveling of King Lear's sanity as he relinquishes power and discovers his own vulnerability. Shakespeare, very carefully, very meticulously, he charts the psychological toll of both gaining and losing authority. What happens to us? What happens to our psyches when we gain power, when we gain authority, and what happens to us when we lose that authority? His history plays, particularly the Richard plays, they examine how power distorts your personality, how power warps your personality. It transforms your personality in a negative sense. The very Machiavellian, manipulative actions of Richard III and the very narcissistic self-destruction of Richard II. All right, these two plays illustrate opposite poles of the same truth, the same basic, the same very foundational, very fundamental truth. And what is that truth? That power distorts your perception. Power distorts your perception of self. Power distorts your perception of reality. All right, in other words, power completely corrupts your mind. And again, contemporary examples are too many. All right, let us look at not just our country, but let's look at beyond the countries beyond. How power distorts, how power completely decimates your sense of the self, and it decimates your sense of reality. As Lord Acton said, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. In Shakespearean plays like Julius Caesar and Coriolanus, Shakespeare explores not just individual psychology, but the collective dynamics of political power. He examines how leaders and followers, both, how leaders and followers engage in a very complex, we can call it a dance, in a very complex dance of manipulation, loyalty, and betrayal. What makes Shakespeare's treatment so remarkably modern is his recognition that power is not just an external force. Power is not something imposed on an individual from the outside, but it is an internal corruption. His characters are seldom simple villains, ordinary villains. This is something I repeatedly tell my students of Renaissance drama, that there are no complete heroes or complete villains in Shakespeare. Shakespeare never sees the world in terms of black or white, but in shades of gray. So there are no pure villains or pure heroes in Shakespeare. But these are very complex human beings whose relationship with power reveals the very sinister, the darker aspects of characteristics like ambition, insecurity, and the fundamental human desire for acknowledgement and for control. We all love to be acknowledged for whatever trivial little achievements we have, and we all love to dominate and to seize control. Uh, and of course, through multiple soliloquies, I won't read out any of those soliloquies, but these soliloquies of his characters, of his tragic characters in particular, they absolutely expose, they lay bare the inner turmoil of his power seekers. And Shakespeare demonstrates that it's easy to wear the crown, but it is in the mind where the true weight of the crown is felt. Henry V, if you remember, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. All right, it feels glorious. Macbeth learns it to his cost. All right, that it's easy. I mean, the crown is a physical presence on your head, but the weight of the crown, the burden of the crown, the edges of the crown, the sharpness of the crown, that is felt deep inside into the mind, and it transforms princes into tyrants and kings into madmen. Now let's look at some of the plays where Shakespeare explores power. One of his most underrated plays, Richard III, written around 1593, where Shakespeare explores Machiavellian psychology. Uh, a bit of historical context again. Uh, Richard III was the monarch who was through whom the Tudor dynasty legitimized itself. Shakespeare inherited this propaganda propagated by the Tudor dynasty, but transformed into a profound psychological study. Like Shakespeare, like all of Shakespeare's characters, by the time we finish reading or watching Richard III, you feel a deep sense of empathy. All right, you realize that he's not really a total Machiavellian villain. All right, there are quite a few redeeming features, particularly his physical deformities, and it's a wonderful psychological study of a dictator, of a tyrant, and it reveals the Elizabethan anxieties about Machiavellian politics, how power is pursued amorally, without any compunction, without any qualms, through manipulation and violence. This man, Richard III, he is the first great psychological manipulation of theatre. His opening soliloquy, "Now is the winter of our discontent." He's hiding behind a throne. And in Laurence Olivier's famous production, nothing happens. The curtains go up and there's nothing, nobody on stage. And the audience is a little restless. And then you suddenly see a pair of eyes are watching you from behind the throne. And then Richard III comes downstage, addresses the audience and says, "Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious by the son of York." This establishes an intimate complicity with the audience. You feel that, yes, this man may be a murderer, or that he may be a multiple murderer, he may be a dictator, but still, Shakespeare magically makes you empathize with Richard III, something only he could do. And we watch him construct different personae. This character, he becomes different things for different people. Richard III reveals the gap between public performance. All right, we every time we appear in public, we assume a different persona. We put on it's more like a performance. We are performing for this other and private intention. But when we are in private, when we are alone with ourselves, all right, then we get to see the real intention and the real motivation of that character. So this is the characteristic, and this thing, the contrast between your apparent self and your inner real self. Already, this is something that Shakespeare. This play was written 1593. So this concept Shakespeare is going to explore repeatedly. And he's physically deformed. He's a cripple. He's a hunchback. So this becomes his psychological motivation. Uh, Cheated of feature, by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time. He was pulled out of his mother's womb like Macduff, right, before his time. So therefore, he grew up a little deformed, and that that constructed his entire future, his adult self. And his power for Richard III is a kind of a compensation. All right, his physical shortcomings, his physical weaknesses, they are compensated for by the power that he wields. So this shows how personal psychology intersects with political ambition. And the play suggests that dictatorship, tyranny, it emerges not just from wickedness, but from psychological injuries, psychological wounds, resentments, animosities, angers, complaints that individuals may have. Richard III kills the husband of Anne, and then over the husband's corpse, he tries to woo her. So this demonstrates the very seductive theatricality of the play. After she surrenders, after Anne surrenders to, she has no option, poor thing. And there's an aside which he gives, which Richard III gives to the audience. Was ever woman in this humor wooed? Was ever woman in this humor won? This shows Richard III's awareness of power as performance. All right, you can use power to get things done for yourself. All right, power is nothing but a kind of a performance. It's a conscious manipulation of psychological mechanisms. From Richard III, now let's move on to the next play, that is Richard II, where the duality of the king, written in the year 1595, 2 years after Richard III. Now, Richard II is a very different kind of a king from Richard III. This was written during the peak of anxiety about Elizabeth's succession. And this was a very politically dangerous play. And in this play, there's a scene, the deposition scene, as I have mentioned. It was censored in public appearance. It was not performed during Elizabeth's time. And the full play, including the deposition scene, was performed during Essex's rebellion. This play dramatizes the psychological unraveling that occurs when political power is stripped away. In India, we have seen so many cases where politicians have been devoid of power. They have lost elections. And then how they become psychologically disturbed. Some of them almost become neurotics. And there's a Richard the scene where Richard II is in prison, and he very painfully, very poignantly, he meditates. I quote, I have been studying how I may compare this prison where I live unto the world. All right. So this soliloquy, it reveals how completely his identity was constituted by his crown. I have known people, when authority taken away from them, they completely, totally lost their identity. It's as if, it was power. Power as a teacher, power as a principal, power as a vice chancellor, power as a minister, power as the prime minister, power as the president. All right. No matter what the nature of power is, it is as if they were defined. They were constituted by power. And once that power was taken away, their identity imploded. All right. Their identity dissolved. It disappeared. And when Richard II surrenders his crown, he says, I must nothing be. Without power, I am nothing. There's a mirror scene here where Richard II stands in front of a mirror, and he calls for a mirror, which was called a looking glass back then. He examines his face and finds it unchanged despite his loss of kingship. I'm not going to read out the entire soliloquy here, but he stands in front of a mirror and he says it's the same face. All right, nothing has changed, but minus the crown, how different it looks. Then what he does is he shatters the mirror, recognizing that the face that he sees, the reflection that he sees, it bears no trace of the identity that he has lost. So this dramatically represents a very deep, a very profound psychological insight. Power is not merely external authority, but it constitutes your sense of self itself. It's constitutive of the individual's selfhood, his notion of the self that is created by power. It also explores this play, Richard II, also explores the psychology of usurpation. Usurpation is seizing power illegitimately. Bolingbroke, who would later become the Tudor monarch Henry IV. Alright, Bolingbroke never explicitly claims the throne. He let circumstances and actions of others carry him to power. And this again reveals a very devious strategy where by which ambitious men rationalize their ascent. On a day we are not seeking power; it's others, popular opinion, mandate. Alright, it's my people in my party who want me to be in power. Alright, so this is again a very subtle mechanism that is exploited by leaders over the centuries. Alright, putting the onus on others, whether it be a political party, whether it be a followers, but it is their wish, and I'm a servant to their wish. So this is how Bolingbroke, who's the anti-hero, who's the I really shouldn't call him an antagonist because he's actually shown as a very virtuous character. But this is how Bolingbroke comes to power. He pretends that he has no interest in power, but because he wants to submit to the wishes of others, he ascends to power. Next play, yes, the ever popular, The Merchant of Venice. Uh, this was written in 1596-97 when anti-Semitism was at its peak in England. Most of the Jews had been expelled from England in 1290s, although some of them lived as converted Christians. But still, there was a lot of suspicion, and again, there was this plot where Shakespeare was believed to have been slow poisoned by her Jewish doctor, and who was later executed. It explores the psychology of economic power and religious marginalization. Shylock embodies the psychology of the marginalized, who turns resentment into retaliatory power. All right, after centuries of suppression, racial suppression, he finally gets an opportunity to avenge his the injustices and wrongdoings and the atrocities perpetrated on his race. And his famous speech, "Hath not a Jew eyes? If you cut us, do we not bleed?" That articulates the psychological damage of systemic dehumanization over centuries, where a Jew can be called a dog, where a Jew can be kicked in the street, and no punishment to follow. And why does Shylock insist on the pound of flesh? It literalizes the violence underlying commercial relationships, right? And it's a relationship between a moneylender and his subject. And the pound of flesh is symbolic of this commercial relationship. The play explores how economic power intersects with religious and ethnic identity. Shylock's power as moneylender exists because Christians are not allowed to charge interest, and that's why Antonio could not get a loan Christian from Christian businessmen, because money lending usury, although it was considered a sin. So he was forced to turn to Shylock, and that's how Shylock came to exercise economic control over Antonio and indirectly Bassanio. Shylock in the Venetian economy occupies an economically crucial but socially despised position. Usury is a sin, and so they are necessary evils who must be allowed to exist. So this creates a psychology of resentment and the desire to humiliate those who simultaneously depend on him and also despise him. When the play opens, in the very opening scene, we hear Antonio talking to two friends. "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad." So this suggests the psychological emptiness at the heart of material life, at the heart of commercial life. Antonio is a rich merchant. In fact, who's the merchant of Venice, we are not very sure. Although whether it refers to Antonio or whether it refers to Shylock, the protagonist or the antagonist, we have no idea. It could refer to both. And Shakespeare was very smart in choosing this title. So, in sooth, I know not why I'm so sad. Material, I am prosperous, but there's a spiritual vacuum. There's a spiritual emptiness within me, alright, for which I have no name. and his willingness to sacrifice himself for Bassanio, it reveals, again, critics have talked about this, that there's an element of a trace of homoeroticism. Maybe Antonio has repressed feelings for Bassanio, and but the play has a very heterosexual resolution. Bassanio is married to Portia, and they all go away. Only Antonio is left behind, and Jessica gets married to Lorenzo. She goes away. Only Shylock is left behind. So when we did the play, when Shakespeare produced Merchant of Venice, so this we tried to make a very poignant scene. All the merrymakers, all the wedding guests, they leave singing and dancing. Antonio stands there looking very forlornly at the stage. And then from the other side, the second half of the stage, which was Shylock's house, Shylock enters from the wings, calls out to Jessica, and then he remembers that Jessica has left him. Now he's left all alone. So the two merchants of Venice, they are left all alone on two halves of the stage. Uh, mm, Portia manipulates the law in the trial scene. So this demonstrates how the powerful use legal structures to maintain dominance. Although she wins, and we applaud, okay, because not a drop of Christian blood is shed. But again, there's deep down somewhere a sense of injustice being perpetrated on Shylock. And there are all these stories about how an African critic said, "Why didn't Shylock heed the knight? Then no blood would have been shed, and he would have been able to cut a pound of flesh," which is something they practice in African villages. All right, take flesh away from, take meat away from animals without killing them, and the heated knife actually seals the blood vessels. So here, Portia, disguised as the lawyer Balthazar, she's manipulating the legal structure, the technicalities, the loopholes in the law, and this is something only the powerful can do. And she insists on the letter of the law: a pound of flesh, but no blood. It shows how law is capable of perpetrating violence disguised as justice. All right? And the contract, although terrible, it's terrible to take a pound of flesh, but the contract was a legal document. You exploited, Balthazar actually exploits the document, seeks out the loophole in the document and saves Antonio, which is, of course, I mean, I'm not saying she was wrong in doing it, but then this was also, in a sense, in a certain sense, this was illegal. So and later, not just that, Shakespeare was forced, Shylock was forced to convert to Christianity. This again represents the most complete victory of power, control not just of behavior, but control of the complete identity. All right, if you take away his Jewishness from Shylock and convert him into a Christian, he won't be able to practice giving interest anymore, because now he's a Christian. He'll be forced to die. Okay, he'll have to starve himself, because usury is not permitted according to Christianity. So this is actually an indirect way of legitimately killing an individual. The very troubling psychology of Merchant of Venice emerges in this treatment of Shylock's forced conversion. All right, and Shakespeare depicts this as comedy, but there's a deep sense of injustice. There's a deep sense of immorality when we watch the play. So the play reveals how power structures naturalize violence, normalize violence against marginalized groups. And we have been seeing repeated cases of this, right, throughout the world. How the marginalized groups, their existing laws, how they are used against marginalized groups and communities, making systematic oppression appear as justice or even mercy. So this is something Shakespeare preempted almost 400 years ago. Yes, often considered Shakespeare's magnum opus. Uh, this was written at the height of the Elizabethan surveillance culture. Hamlet dramatizes a world where everyone is spying on everyone else. Right? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are spying on Hamlet. Ophelia, at her father's insistence, is spying on Hamlet. The play reflects contemporary anxiety about succession. Claudius has usurped the throne, illegally ascended to the throne. all right, how fragile the political order is, and the difficulty of distinguishing genuine from performed emotion. And it's a court culture, the Danish court culture, the court culture of Denmark, is based entirely on pretension, on dissimulation. Suddenly, the courtiers don't want Hamlet as the successor. Now they are all supporters of Claudius. Hamlet's Denmark is like Foucault's panopticon. Polonius hides behind the curtains, hides behind the tapestry, the arras, to spy on the conversation between his own daughter and Hamlet. Claudius and Polonius use Ophelia as a kind of a bait. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, his friends, Hamlet's friends, they are sent to probe Hamlet's mind. And the play within the play, which Hamlet stages, that becomes an instrument of psychological surveillance. He's using art. Hamlet is using art, drama, to trap the conscience of the king. Hamlet himself recognizes this. He says, Denmark is a prison, he tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. When they object, when they say, no, it's not really a prison, he responds, why? Then 'tis none to you. For there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Proverbial lines. To me, it is a prison. This reveals a very modern, a very sophisticated understanding of how political constructs, how political structures shape subjective experience. Hamlet also explores the play, Hamlet the play, explores the psychology of political action within corrupt systems. Hamlet, the Laurence Olivier play said it's a tragedy of a man who could not make up his mind. It's a play about indecision. But it can be read not just as personal weakness, but as a rational response to a situation where all clear paths. Kindly mute yourself, somebody.
I request Seema Patil to kindly mute her device. Seema Patil, madam. Yes, sir, you can continue, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hamlet's indecision, I would think it's not a weakness, it's not a character flaw, but it's a strategy. All right, it's a strategy which he uses, it's a rational response. Hamlet lives in a Denmark where no matter which path he takes, all right, killing Claudius, trying to kill Claudius, it has to lead to a moral compromise. He notices how happy his mother is in the second marriage. He notices how competent our king Claudius is for Denmark. So killing Claudius, although his father explicitly commands him to do so, it would definitely lead to a moral and political compromise. So rather than do that, he does what many leaders do. Okay, do nothing. Okay, doing nothing is also an action. Okay, so he does nothing. He keeps postponing the inevitable. His pretended madness, what Shakespeare calls antique disposition, this feigned madness, pretended madness, becomes a form of resistance, which creates a space of interpretative uncertainty, where he can speak truth that would be otherwise considered prisoners. Nobody takes a madman seriously. Just like in King Lear, we have the fool, all right, who speaks such infinite words of wisdom, but he's not taken seriously because he's a fool. And that's why in Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare says, the poet, the lover, and the madman out of imagination are all compact. All right, the fool and the lunatic. All right, they might speak a great deal of wisdom, but they would never be taken seriously. So these are the two strategies that Macbeth adopts. One is indecision, and the other is pretended madness. And this is a play, as you know, which is a play of soliloquies, multiple soliloquies. There are 6 major soliloquies and I think 4 minor ones. So these soliloquies dramatize an intense form of self-surveillance, showing consciousness turning upon itself under tremendous political pressure. Macbeth is a character who, like Gandhi, is constantly being self-critical, he's constantly performing self-examination on himself. Take that soliloquy. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. He is flogging himself. He's admonishing himself. He's flagellating himself, self-flagellation. These soliloquies illustrate power does not operate externally. but through internalized self-judgment. Othello. Epistemic violence for all the college students who are here. Epistemic violence refers to, it's a term coined by this very famous Indian critic, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. It means the harm caused by systematically devaluing, all right, to kind of reducing, ignoring, or silencing certain forms of knowledge and ways of knowing at the expense of official ones. An example would be when the colonial powers came to India, when the British came to India, they derided our knowledge system, they all derided our value systems, our belief systems, and they tried to suppress that and impose their own value systems, their own rationalistic value systems over that. So this was an example of epistemic violence. And we see examples of that in Othello. This was written around the time 1603 and 4. This was written around the time of James's ascension. And England had become increasingly engaged with racial difference because a lot of blacks were now coming into England. There was colonial expansion, there was Mediterranean trade, Algerians and Moroccans, they were coming to England. And the play explores the psychology of the outsider. How does an outsider how does a minority member feel in a majority community? The psychology of the outsider who has achieved power within a society, but that society fundamentally regards him as an alien. You may be a general in the Venetian army, but that does not necessarily make you an insider. And he tries to emphasize the fact that he belongs, he's an insider, by marrying this beautiful white heroine, Desdemona. Othello's position in Venice is very precarious. As a mood, he is valued for his military prowess, but he's never fully integrated, he's never fully accepted. This racial marginalization creates a psychological vulnerability within Othello, and that vulnerability is exploited by the nefarious Iago. Othello has internalized various aspects of Venetian racist discourse. He is anxious that the beautiful Desdemona, the beautiful white Desdemona, could not truly love him. That love is more because of, an alter ego of Othello that she has created in her mind. Although she does not love the actual Othello. And he's constantly aware of his status as an outsider. This is a point on which I had kind of not really argued, but I had pointed this out to Mr. Vishal Bhardwaj when he made Omkara. He had some interview had given his email ID, and I had told him that Omkara, this sense of insecurity, already he does not have it. He's super confident. Ajay Devgan playing Omkara, right? So he is absolutely confident, and this sense of insecurity, this sense of vulnerability, that is missing in the character. Othello, when Iago slow poisons his ear against Desdemona and uses his racial power, Iago is white. Alright, so whatever he says is believed by the black Othello. But that does not come across in Omkara. Why should confident, a very secure person like Omkara believe in the fact that his lady love is being unfaithful, or there's a case of infidelity? So this is something that the Hindi adaptation missed out on. And this Othello has, he cannot truly believe that Desdemona loves him. He believes that Desdemona loves the idea of Othello, what Othello stands for, his valor, all right, his martial superiority. That is what she loves, not him as a person. Iago represents in fact, if you are an actor, if you want to play a role in Othello, I suggest that you go for Iago rather than Othello. Othello is a very two-dimensional character, a very flat character. I found Othello the most insipid of all Shakespeare's tragic heroes. But Iago, the most Machiavellian of villains, all right, he is a more intense version of Macbeth and Claudius, if I may put it that way. So he represents powers most insidious form. Control over not just an other person, not just another's actions, but control over the other's knowledge and beliefs. Uh, he, how does he manipulate Iago? By distorting Othello's perception of reality. He says, I am not what I am. Only Emilia, his wife, knows who he truly is. And Iago thus articulates the gap between appearance and reality, and that enables his psychological violence. The ocular proof scene, all right, the handkerchief scene, it demonstrates this epistemic violence. The manipulation of what counts as knowledge. Iago constructs a false reality through strategic revelation and concealment, showing how power operates through controlling information and interpretation. It's a very innocent act, the dropping of a handkerchief. All right. But that simple innocent act of dropping the handkerchief, it is reconstituted as an act of infidelity. The handkerchief is taken by Iago to cashier's room and provided as evidence that this is where Desdemona must have left it. Othello is the character who disintegrates psychologically the fastest of all Shakespeare's plays. From a very eloquent, from a very self-confident general to incoherent rage. All right, in some scenes he's virtually inarticulate with rage and fury, and this illustrates how jealousy destroys the cognitive functions of humans. But the play suggests that this is not merely, what shall I say, not merely personal psychology, but reflects the intersections of race, gender, and power. Othello's vulnerability originates partly from his position as racial outsider and racial outsider trying to possess a white Venetian woman. And this is an achievement that Venice's racist society finds incredible. And the play's tragic recognition comes too late. Uh, as he very heartbreakingly says, one that loved not wisely, but too well, of one not easily jealous, but being wrought, perplexed in the extreme. Othello recognizes that he had been manipulated. He recognizes his manipulation, but the consequences he cannot undo because it's too late. Desdemona is already dead. I'll rapidly go through the other plays. Measure for Measure. This is a comedy, more of a tragic comedy, 1604. And your license. If you were caught for adultery, you would be punished. So, the psychology of moral authority and its hypocrisies. Angelo, he embodies the psychology of repression and corruption it breeds. He's the Duke's deputy. Now he has power, political power. He enforces Vienna's sexual morality laws with harsh rigidity. But when he desires Isabella, his repressed sexuality erupts as tyrannical coercion. Okay, so he's a hypocrite in that sense. He sets aside the laws and wields his power to blackmail and seduce Isabella. And that he has a very famous soliloquy, "Blood, thou art blood." It reveals acute self-awareness. He's aware that he's a hypocrite. He recognizes that there's a gap, a massive gap between his public morality and private desire. And yet he proceeds to woo and seduce Isabella. So this, again, this incident, this track, it illustrates how power enables the powerful to compartmentalize their action. I mean, it's as if they have, the law does not apply to them. Okay, the law applies to the all and sundry, the general citizenry, but they are untouched by the law. They are not really governed by the same laws. So it's as if they live two compartmentalized halves: the public self and the private self, which are completely contradictory. The Duke's manipulation throughout the play represents a very kind, a benevolent version of surveillance and control. If you know, the Duke is constantly watching how his deputy Angelo is performing. So it's a kinder and benevolent version of surveillance and control. And yet it raises disturbing questions about how far even benevolent, paternalistic power can go. The Duke stages scenarios, controls information, manipulates characters, which he claims are for their own good. And this is how, this is what Foucault had called pastoral power. Authority exercised through care and guidance, but ultimately just as controlling as overt coercion. Authority saying, "Oh, we are, monitoring you. We are, have put you under surveillance for your own benefit to control you. No internet, all right. So using snoopware to control your actions, setting up CCTV cameras to, but then apparently this is for your own benefit. Apparently this is a very parental care. This is very parental.
Hello, Sarthak Gupta, please mute your device. Sarthak Gupta, I request Sarthak Gupta.
Yes, ma'am.
Please mute your device. You're distracting, please. Mute कर
Yes,
दीजिए.
ma'am. Sorry.
Can I continue?
Yes, sir. You can continue, sir. Yes.
Okay. So this is authority exercised through care and guidance, but in the final reckoning, this is just as controlling as coercion. Isabella's situation dramatizes the gendered psychology of powerlessness. Angelo's proposition, "Yield up thy body to my will," it literalizes, it literally dramatizes, presents on stage the sexual dimension of power. Isabella passionately refuses. More than our brother is our chastity, because that is the deal. All right, if you submit yourself to my will, then I'll release your brother. This may be problematic to our sensibilities, to modern ears, but it asserts autonomy in the only realm that she controls. A woman, the only kingdom, the only domain, the only realm that she controls is her own body. And it is a matter of her choice, right? I mean, even for your worst threats, I would not submit or surrender my body over which only I have control. And the play also explores a word which recurs repeatedly in this play, that is the word seeming. Oh, what may man within him hide, though angel on the outward side. Externally, we might look like angels, but oh, what are the things, what are the deep, sinister things that we may conceal within us? And again, this line, this connects to contemporary anxiety about the gap between appearance and reality. How much of what we see is real, and how much of it is merely show, how much of it is merely appearance in both politics, social life, and any different political life, religious life. King Lear, also written during James's reign. This explores the psychology of abdication and division of kingdoms. These are very highly sensitive topics, and the play depicts political fragmentation and its catastrophic consequences. And this again would have resonated very well with the Elizabethans and their anxieties about national unity. Lear's decision to trifurcate his kingdom while retaining the name and all the addition to a king reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of power psychology. Lear believes that authority and identity can be separated, that one can abdicate power while maintaining its privileges and the selfhood it provided. But later he would learn painfully that this is not so. Once you surrender power, once you surrender authority, then that also diminishes your identity. His question in Madness, who is it that can tell me who I am? All right, it embodies the play's insight. Identity is not pre-political, but constituted through power relations. Uh, Sartre would later, in the 20th century, in a different context, of course, in the existential context, we talk about existence preceding essence. When Lear loses authority, he loses his selfhood. He's no longer the Lear of the past. His decline into madness, it dramatizes the psychological violence of this loss. King Lear, the play, explores power's capacity to blind those who possess it. In fact, blindness is a constant theme in the play. Gloucester is physically blinded, Lear is morally and psychologically blinded. And Lear is unable to distinguish genuine love, that is Cordelia's love, from the flattery of Regan and Gonadil. This illustrates how power corrupts perception and judgment. Because he's so egoistic, because he's so blinded by he's almost intoxicated by power. His judgment is blinded. He cannot distinguish the truthful from the deceitful. He gradually recognizes the truth, and it culminates in that heartbreaking scene. Oh, I have taken too little care of this. When he meets poor Tom, he learns to be shocked. This is how the people of my kingdom live, and it represents a very painful psychological education at great cost, at the cost of his own life and the life of Cordelia. All this reality, this education, was hidden from him so far by power. While he was wearing the crown, he was not able to see how the poor of his kingdom lived. Gloucester's parallel story, also the subplot, it also literalizes the metaphor of blindness. Gloucester's physical blinding corresponds to Lear's psychological blindness, and both achieve clear vision through their suffering. I stumbled when I saw, Gloucester realizes. Now that I'm blind, I see clearly. Uh, mm, what actually remains when institutional power, when authoritarian power is stripped away? What remains with you? What remains with an individual? Um, when Lear and the food out of the head reduced to unaccommodated man, poor Tom, Edgar disguised as poor Tom, Lear realizes that this is man at his most fundamental, two-legged forked animal. Lear discovers a shared humanity previously invisible, unavailable to him, invisible to him. The psychology of powerlessness, paradoxically, becomes the path to authentic human recognition. Only after losing power does Lear realize that all human beings are equal. Losing power makes him understand democracy in its true sense. Okay, Macbeth. Uh, am I going out of time?
Yes, please try to conclude.
Okay, I'll just talk shortly about Macbeth.
Right.
Yeah, Macbeth, as we know, was again written during the after the gunpowder plot and traces the most detailed psychological portrait of corruption by power. All of you have studied Macbeth, even the students here, and there's no need to discuss it in great detail. But towards the end, Macbeth realizes that he has given up everything meaningful for nothing. All right, that famous speech, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. The play also explores the notion of equivocation. The porter's drunken speech connects through contemporary anxiety about, pretension, about hypocrisy, and tyranny itself is built on equivocation, the gap between appearance and reality. Antony and Cleopatra, written in the year 1606 and 7, explores the tension between personal desire and public duty, between Eastern and Western models of power. The play constantly emphasizes performance and spectacle. Cleopatra is endlessly theatrical. She says, I am fire and air, understanding that power, particularly feminine power, in a patriarchal system, in a patriarchal context, requires constant performance. You have to into aesthetic and moral victory. This is a favorite play of mine, Coriolanus, which examines the psychology of the contempt that the aristocrats, that the powerful have for democracy, and the political consequences of psychological inflexibility. Coriolanus's ego, all right, it actually leads to his final death, actually leads to tragic consequences. And Shakespeare in this play explores how psychological rigidity in political context demand flexibility and performance. The Tempest. Okay. Tempest is considered to be Shakespeare's final play, where Shakespeare is trying to discover the psychology of colonial domination. Prospero represents the colonizer, and to your extreme right, you see Caliban, who's the colonized. And relationship, what is the relationship between knowledge? What is knowledge? Why isn't Caliban's knowledge knowledge, and why is Prospero's magic knowledge? Okay, so Shakespeare is trying to explore the relationship between knowledge, magic, and political power. Prospero represents absolute power, Western power. His magic gives him godlike control. And Caliban's famous speech, "You taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse." So the empire cursed back. All right, when Salman Rushdie won all those prizes, he said that this is how the empire curses back. The empire writes back. And the conclusion of the Tempest represents a rare instance where Shakespeare shows someone voluntarily relinquishing power. In all these plays, you don't come across a character who renounces power, but when Prospero lays down his magic wand, he is actually relinquishing power. "I'll drown my book," he declares, suggesting that their wisdom, all right, true satisfaction, true gratification might lie beyond the limits of power. Okay, now I'll conclude. Shakespeare's career spans a unique historical moment. These are you can take a pick if you want. This is how these are the six things that the six elements of if you study all the plays of Shakespeare, you'll find that these are the six basic strands which run through all his plays. Shakespeare witnessed succession crises, assassination plots, rebellions, and the constant anxiety of living under surveillance. And these experiences giving intimate knowledge about the various dimensions of power. The first one, surveillance creates paranoia and self-regulation. The Elizabethan security state taught Shakespeare that power operates through visibility and the internalization of the watcher's gaze. The second, legitimacy is performative, not essential. The uncertainty of succession and the theatricality of royal power reveal that authority rests on belief, ceremony, and successful performance rather than inherent right. Power corrupts through psychological mechanisms. Shakespeare witnessed how power isolates. All right, when you are in power, you become isolated, creates paranoia, and diminishes your ability to empathize, and breeds the need for increasingly violent self-assertion. The fourth, identity is constituted through power relations. Political identities are unstable. Who is loyal? Who is disloyal? Who's a traitor? Which religious confession is true? All these reveal identity as relational. All right, identity is relative and contingent. Identity is never fixed. Identity is always professional, vis-a-vis. It's always relative to something else. Language constructs political reality. In a world of equivocation, propaganda, insecurity, and surveillance, Shakespeare recognized that whoever controls discourse controls reality. All right, control language, control discourse, and you control all aspects of reality. Resistance is always possible, as Foucault said. Even in his darkest plays, characters find ways to resist, they find ways to critique, and they find ways to reimagine power relations, suggesting that power's grip is never absolute. So there is always anxiety and the intellectual tools to conduct this analysis. Shakespeare lived in an age when political theology was breaking down, but political philosophy had not yet fully emerged. Shakespeare used drama as a kind of a lab, a laboratory for investigating the psychology of power. And this was such a sophisticated investigation that it still illuminates contemporary political life and leaves us with so much to understand and to imbibe from his exploration. Thank you. Any question, if there is time?
Yes, dear participants, if you have any questions, please unmute your device and you can ask the questions. The forum is open for discussion. So you can stop the screen sharing, sir. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, good afternoon.
This session has been very wonderful and very unique in the sense of psychology of power.
Ma'am, we can't hear you. Can you speak
Can't
loud?
hear you, can't hear you. Is there something between you
Okay,
and
sir.
your mic?
Okay. Good afternoon. I complimented this session on your lecture. It has been a very unique lecture in my sense. Sir, I have a question in my mind instantly. In most of the creations, Shakespeare introduced this kind of whimsical and psychological traumas. Is there any a single work in that Shakespeare never used it as part of psychology?
I couldn't really follow what you said. You mean, is there any secondary critical work on one book I repeatedly referred to is a book called Tyrant by Stephen Greenblatt, where Shakespeare where Greenblatt, the subaltern theorist, and the new historicist, he talks about how the power leads to tyranny, and how that kind of distorts the psychology of the individual in power. Does that answer your question? I couldn't clearly hear what you asked.
Yes, sir, I understand as an extent that
Okay, you wanted the name of okay. Stephen Greenblatt has recently written a biography of Christopher Marlowe called Dark Renaissance, where again many of these concepts about power and power constituting our selfhood, our identities, that is discussed in this book, 2025 book called Dark Renaissance.
yes, sir, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, any questions? Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. You offered a wonderful and yes, sir.
I'm sorry
Yes,
it got
sir.
so late, but I was trying to give a lot of examples. Maybe I should have
No, sir.
restricted my theotech.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You offered a wonderful and exhaustive intellectual feast with your simplified style, which was indeed very feasible, and to understand the theories of power, as you explained in the beginning, and understanding these theories in different facets in context to Shakespearean anxious universe from your Shakespearean mindset. Thank you, sir, for gracing today's session and enlightening our dear participants with your power-packed session. I
Thank you.
extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizers and the coordinators of this wonderful 7 days national online certificate course. I'm thankful to our dear participants.
My thanks
Yes,
to everybody.
yes, sir. I'm thankful to dear participants for your patience listening and looking forward to yet another interesting session tomorrow at the same time. Till then, goodbye and take care. Thank you, Supan sir, for your exhaustive and very intellectual session, sir. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
If
Usha,
we meet again, why then we shall smile? If not, why then this parting was well made. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the wonderful.
That was from Julius Caesar. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful, Supan. Thank you so much.